Ask anyone what the Statue of Liberty stands for, and they will tell you it was built explicitly to welcome immigrants arriving in the United States. But look closely down at the copper feet of the monument, and you will find a broken chain and shattered iron shackles. Those chains point to a different origin story. The artist who designed the figure placed them there to commemorate the abolition of slavery and the Union's victory in the American Civil War. The concept dates back to 1865, originating during an after-dinner conversation hosted by Édouard René de la Boulaye, a prominent French abolitionist. Today, the statue is universally recognized as a global icon of immigration, a reputation that has eclipsed the specific domestic political intent of its original creators. La Boulaye had an ulterior motive. Living under the repressive regime of Napoleon III, he hoped that by building a massive monument honoring the success of American democracy, he could inspire the French public to rise up against their own monarchy. To translate that political ambition into a physical object, he recruited sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Bartholdi's vision required fabricating a 151-foot-tall copper goddess, assembling her in Paris, breaking her down into hundreds of wooden crates, and shipping the entire structure across the Atlantic Ocean. Taking a radical political metaphor and forcing it into a colossal physical reality meant confronting immense engineering and economic barriers. Bartholdi needed a way to keep the massive, hollow copper structure standing upright in the brutal winds of New York Harbor. He found his solution in Gustave Eiffel, who designed an internal, flexible iron truss tower. This illustrates Eiffel's curtain wall construction. The outer copper skin is supported entirely by the iron skeleton, bearing none of its own weight. Zooming in, flat iron saddles allow the skin to flex and breathe independently. Without this, harbor winds would tear the rigid metal apart. While Eiffel solved the engineering crisis, an economic disaster was brewing. The French public successfully raised the money to build the statue, but the American public, stuck in a deep, paralyzing economic depression, refused to pay for the required foundation and pedestal. The project was saved from bankruptcy by newspaper publisher Joseph Pulitzer. He launched a viral micro-donation campaign in his paper, bypassing wealthy elites, funding it with small contributions, including pennies from working-class citizens and savings from schoolchildren. The structural flexibility Eiffel designed on the inside was mirrored by the grassroots, democratized financial flexibility that rescued the monument on the outside. When the massive statue was finally dedicated in October 1886, the ceremony highlighted deep ideological divisions rather than national unity. A group of suffragists chartered a boat to protest the event. They were outraged by the obvious, glaring irony of using a towering female figure to represent liberty in a country that legally denied women the right to vote. The critique was equally fierce from African American publications, most notably the Cleveland Gazette. The paper published an editorial calling the monument a howling farce. The authors pointed out the stark hypocrisy of celebrating a beacon of freedom while the nation actively terrorized its black citizens and stripped them of their civil rights. Upon its completion, the statue did not function as a unifying monument. Instead, it stood as a massive, controversial lightning rod, violently exposing the deep and painful contradictions of American freedom. Looking at this time-lapse simulation, you can see the physical transformation the monument underwent in its first few decades. The original shiny copper surface reacted with the air and water in the harbor, oxidizing into a bright, chalky verdigris green. During this period, the statue failed at its practical, government-assigned role. The flame was far too dim to function effectively as a lighthouse. Then, during World War I, German saboteurs detonated munitions on nearby Black Tom Island. The massive explosion sent shrapnel flying into the statue, permanently closing the torch to the public. By the early 20th century, these practical failures and physical damages left the monument a silent green landmark. It sat in the harbor as a weathered icon, its original political context beginning to fade from the public's memory. At the exact same time, a massive wave of European immigrants was arriving by ship into New York Harbor. Because the statue stood right next to the Ellis Island Processing Center, these arriving passengers spontaneously reinterpreted the figure. They bypassed the monument's Civil War origins and embraced it as a personal sign of welcome to their new home. This grassroots redefinition was formally cemented in 1903, A bronze plaque was attached to the pedestal bearing Emma Lazarus's poem, explicitly defining the figure as the Mother of Exiles. The Statue of Liberty operates as an ever-changing mirror, absorbing and reflecting the evolving struggles and ideals of the world it enlightens.